760 horsepower. This is the most powerful Mustang Ford has ever built. In fact, it's the most powerful production car Ford has ever built, full stop. And it sounds completely unhinged.
It's the 2021 Mustang Shelby GT500. Sitting atop the 5.2-litre V8 is an enormous Roots-type supercharger which requires 90 horsepower just to get it working. Power goes to the rear axle via a 7-speed dual-clutch gearbox. You can't have a manual. The GT500 has a wild body kit, the old Mustang headlights, and here at least, a very eye-catching paint job. In the US, it starts at just under $73,000.
It looks like just about the most intimidating car on the road. And it is big, so that doesn't help with your first impressions. But actually, this thing is a complete doddle to drive. The ride is good, the steering is accurate, it's not too heavy, visibility is fine. It's actually quite mild-mannered in normal driving. The exhaust is obnoxiously loud, but there is a quiet mode, and in that mode, it's really quiet. As long as you don't give it too much throttle, the exhaust really shuts the hell up, and then you can drive this thing almost discreetly, you know, apart from the way it looks. And it's the same when you start driving it a bit harder as well. I was expecting it to be a wallowy old boat of a thing with no steering precision, no body control, no traction whatsoever. I've driven plenty of very powerful Mustangs built by independent tuning companies that feel exactly like that. So I assumed that this GT500 would be the same. But it really isn't. It's properly well sorted. The steering, for instance, it's really sharp. There's a good sense of connection to the front axle. You feel the grip, and there's tons of grip as well. Traction is good. I mean, there's so much power and so much torque going just through two contact patches that you'd expect this car would just light up its rear tyres at the merest brush of the throttle, but it doesn't. It puts the power down so well. It deals with a bumpy road surface far better than I imagined it would. And so you've got this really well tied down, cohesive car that's quite communicative, and so far from being the most intimidating thing I've ever driven, this is actually the kind of car you can take by the scruff of the neck and throw at a road. It always feels really big. It's massive, this thing. And on much narrower British B roads, yeah, that can be a bit of a problem. That means that you sort of temper your enthusiasm and just drive very cautiously. But on these more open, wider roads, it's brilliant. This dual clutch gearbox is good, it's smooth, it's crisp, it's quick, but really, we need to talk about the engine. Supercharged V8, 760 horsepower, and an exhaust that sounds like this. That is a proper Detroit V8 muscle car rumble. It's so bassy and so loud, and then when you get right up to the top end, it really starts barking and howling. This engine is a masterpiece. Honestly, I've driven plenty of very powerful Mustangs, very powerful muscle cars, and so often they just don't feel as fast as you expect them to. This one really does. It feels every one of its 760 horsepower. It pulls so hard through the mid-range, and it just keeps going to 7,500 RPM, just keeps pulling all the way up there. One big surprise is that it's actually a pretty good Grand Tourer, this Shelby GT500. It's comfortable on the motorway, not that loud. These seats are comfortable. If you really wanted to, you could daily this thing. But here's the thing, you can't actually buy one in the UK. You can import one yourself, but the steering wheel would be on the wrong side. And once you paid to have it shipped over and covered all the taxes, it would cost a fortune. Here though, is a faster, sharper Mustang you can buy in the UK.
The Mustang Bullitt pays tribute to the iconic Steve McQueen film of the same name. It arrived in 2018, and though you can't buy a new one now, there are plenty in the classifieds with low miles for around £50,000. It has a naturally aspirated V8 with 460 horsepower, a manual gearbox, a completely retuned chassis, and Brembo brakes.
It's been around a little while now, this Bullitt, but I don't think Ford Performance has ever got the credit that it deserves for this car. I suspect a lot of people looked at it and just thought it was a very cynical marketing stunt. Take a Mustang, paint it dark green, put some different wheels on it, give it a cue ball gear knob, stick a load of Bullitt badges all over the place, and hey presto, you sell a load more Mustangs. But actually that completely disregards all the really good detail engineering work that was done beneath the skin, to the chassis, to the steering, to the engine. This Bullitt is so much better to drive than a normal Mustang GT. Night and day, it's a world apart. It's so much sharper, so much sportier, so much more responsive. For instance, body control in this thing is really good, much like that GT500. You don't really expect it. And the steering in this car is seriously impressive. Okay, it's an electric rack, and this is a big, heavy car with loads of rubber on the road, so it's never going to be really super detailed. But it's so well tuned and so well keyed into the chassis. The instant you turn into a corner, you just feel it. You feel the grit down the side of the car. You feel the response. And it's so unusual for a muscle car to steer that way. It all means that this is such a fun car to drive, even on narrow British B roads. It just works in our country. You can really hustle it, drive it the way you would a European sports car. And it's so satisfying to drive. The engine is just spot on for this car. It's absolutely spot on. Proper rumbling V8 compared to the supercharged V8 in that GT500. It's lazier, it doesn't rev so quickly. It doesn't chase to the red line with the same manic energy, so you have to keep your foot in, allow it to build the revs, and then it starts hauling, then it starts rowing through the gears, and the car's quick. And this car's nothing like as stupidly noisy as that GT500. It's just a much more melodic, tuneful V8 soundtrack. I love it. And of course, in this Bullitt Mustang, you can have a manual gearbox. I think the gearbox alone is reason enough to have this Bullitt over the GT500. And yeah, that Shelby GT500, it is fun, it is silly, it's crazy fast. But honestly, for me, I much prefer this Bullitt. I like that it's subtler, that it's not as noisy, that you can use the performance more of the time. It's sweeter to drive. I'm actually properly bowled over by this thing.
You can buy a grey import GT500 in the UK, but you'll pay more than £100,000 for it. The Bullitt mightn't have that car's frightening power, but it is better to drive, and it's available at less than half the price. It's easy to be sniffy about American muscle cars, but the very best of them, including the GT500 and Bullitt, are more characterful than any European coupe. If you want fun, you want a Mustang. Thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe to the Pistonheads YouTube channel and let us know what you think of these two cars in the comments.